Welcome back to the TMDSAS podcast. This is Enrique Hasso, the coordinator of research, advising services, and digital media at the TMDSAS office in Austin, Texas. Today, I'm very, very happy to have Dr. Deb Beck from the University of North Texas join us. Hi, Dr. Beck.
Hello, Mr. Hasso. How are you?
I'm doing great. Very happy to have you here today.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
Great. And we have a very important topic to discuss. Today, we'll be talking about our re-applicants. And right now, we are at a point in the application cycle where many people are still on a wait list and waiting to hear back from a school. And we're actually reaching a point where the application is about to open and they may be thinking about becoming re-applicants. And so first off, I want to define what a re-applicant is. That's somebody who has submitted the application in a previous application cycle and will now be applying again to medical school or dental school or veterinary school. And so let's go ahead and first talk a little bit about why people have to reapply.
Okay. Well, there are two types of students who may be reapplying, and one type is the one who did not get an interview to any of the health profession schools. The other kind is on a wait list, or maybe they're not on the wait list, but they can be thinking about reapplying because they didn't get an interview. So there are several different people who may be thinking about reapplying.
Right.
Yeah.
And so in talking about those two different groups, I think you have an analogy to a stool that you'd like to discuss.
Oh, yes.
I think this is a great time to jump into that.
Okay. Yes. At UNT, we teach our students about a four-legged stool, and we may need to add a fifth leg to that as well.
It can be very sturdy.
It will be a sturdy stool, yes. So first of all, we explain that the grades come first because typically the students will get very excited about getting into volunteering and shadowing, and that's really exciting and fun because it's something they want to go into in the future. But those grades, the GPA always comes first. So it's a lot easier to get an interview if that GPA is upward of a 4.0. Doesn't have to be perfect, of course. And then the second leg will be the entrance exams. And we can get into that a little later if Enrique wants to. And then the third part is volunteer work, your service work. And that's very important to showing that you're altruistic and somewhat empathetic, but specifically altruistic. And then the fourth leg is the shadowing, and then we're adding this fifth leg of the good communication skills.
Right.
So that's kind of the overview.
Great. Well, let's dig into each one of those legs of the stool a little bit deeper. So let's say that I'm an applicant who has a very borderline GPA. You know, I pulled up the statistics that we have on TMDSAS.com, and I see that I'm right in the middle of the average GPA, and I want to increase my GPA because I know that's the one area that I need to improve.
Right.
You know, because my MCAT is perfect, and I have all the shadowing and all the volunteering, and I know that's the one area I need to correct. How does one start thinking about how to improve their GPA? You know, there comes a certain point where you have so many credit hours that improving GPA becomes very difficult.
Well, there are ways to do it, and Enrique, that's correct that it may not improve the overall GPA as much, but on the TMDSAS application, they look at, as you know, they look at the application by semester.
Yes.
So as long as there is an upward trend, many of the schools will see that upward trend by semester, and will be encouraged that you found the way to study better, good time management skills. Maybe you have finally figured out that it doesn't hurt to ask for help.
Yes.
And find the tutoring or the learning center on campus. So those are all ways to help bring up the GPA. It doesn't really help to take easier courses. Yeah, that may boost the GPA, but the med schools and dental schools, and certainly the vet school, they're kind of onto you and say, oh, yeah, I took basket weaving 101 and made an A, but that's not going to help your reputation, for one thing, or really your science GPA, because you're also working on two separate GPA reports there. And one is your overall, and one is your BCPM, biology, chemistry, physics, and math.
Which basket weaving does not qualify for.
Not yet. So, yeah, so it's just, I think a lot of it is being able to ask for help, and some of the science people don't like to do that, I think. But, yeah, go, and there are many resources on all campuses.
Yes, absolutely.
To do that, to get help.
And, you mentioned that we look at GPAs per semester, and there are also so many different types of GPAs that TMDSAS calculates.
Right.
We have the overall GPA, a science GPA, the BCPM GPA, non-science GPA.
Even post-bac GPA.
Post-bac GPA.
If you need to repair it that way.
Graduate, undergraduate, overall, you name it, we got it.
So they're trying to see the better part of your academic record.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great. Well, let's go ahead and tackle the exams.
The exams. Well, of course, for medical school, it's the Medical College Admission Test, the MCAT. This is, I call it the marathon exam now, the MCAT, because it is extra long now that it's the MCAT 2015. And I encourage my students to study, definitely, and get the review courses. But a big part of that is training your body and your brain to sit for that long at a computer, and also to read on a computer screen. And I believe this year, for the first time, they give them whiteboards, a stack of whiteboards, instead of scratch paper. So they've got to get used to that. These are the pre-meds, of course. And some of my students were talking to me about that this week, and they're not used to using the whiteboards, and they're not allowed to erase those. That you get a new whiteboard. And so that's kind of clunky, but then it's getting used to reading the long passages on the computer screen also. So find a good source of review materials. Now, there are the standard ones that are expensive. You can take a course, or there are a lot of new online resources now. And I always quote the TMDSAS on this to take at least 8 full-length ones, and that's a full day. And take the breaks and feed your brain with the Snickers or the Power Bars. I prefer Snickers. And take your breaks. Don't be stoic and try to go straight through on that MCAT. They allow you to have a locker with water and food in it. When they allow you to do that,
you take advantage.
You take advantage of it, because it's a 7.5-hour exam now. So it is a marathon. Something that people don't realize and can put them off at the beginning of the exam, which kind of throws you off mentally, is that they do fingerprint you. And it's because people have hired people to take the MCAT for them. So there are security measures that people have to go through, and that can really throw off your game if you think, oh my goodness, they're fingerprinting me. So be aware of those things as well. Of course, for re-applicants, they've already taken the MCAT, but I guess I digress here.
No, and I think you brought up some really important points, and I know a lot of people are very curious about where that 8 test scores statistic came from. So I'd just like to give a little bit of insight on that.
Please do.
As some of y'all may know, I was in the Joint Admission Medical Program for 6 years. And in that program, we provide all of the students free MCAT preparation. And so I did a study where we analyzed how many full-length practice test scores those students took and the correlation between how many students met the minimum MCAT score required by the Joint Admission Medical Program. And we found that those students that took 8 or more full-length practice tests were actually much more successful than students that took less than that. And the 8 full-length practice tests actually became a magic number that we started using. And so keep in mind that not every test prep program is going to have 8 full-length practice tests. The AAMC provides a few. They have a sample test as well. But really just simulating the scenario of what you'll be facing during test day, sitting down in an environment where you don't have full control over everything, maybe renting out a room in a library where you can't control the temperature and your refrigerator is much farther away, and you don't have full control over the noises that are going to be popping up. That's what you'll be experiencing in a test prep center. And so you want to make sure that you are situating yourself in a position where you simulate the test area as best as possible and get your body used to that.
And it will be a different computer than you're used to. They don't have laptops.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
The third leg is a volunteer.
Oh, yes, the volunteering. This should be enjoyable to people, to find an ongoing project that they can do. And almost every community has a hospice that you could volunteer for. You do want some training for that, and most good hospices will train their volunteers first. So I like to caution people about hospice work because it's very difficult to sit with terminally ill people sometimes, but it's also very rewarding to do that and to help the families out. Camp John Mark is a camp for sick kids. And they're just a week long, and they always need camp counselors. And some of the, I believe, UT Southwestern doctors and med students work that camp. So that's also a good thing to be able to get input from people like that. But there's all sorts of free clinics in Denton. Of course, it's a smaller town. It's a college town, but we do have a free clinic. We have a soup kitchen. Most towns have soup kitchens or food banks that you can, are Meals on Wheels.
Yes.
It's people contact.
That's what's important.
And giving from your heart. And that's what I try to explain. Yeah, you can do the fun runs and hand out water to, the capital 10K, but that's not really the purpose of that volunteer work. We want you to work with people, and even the community schools projects where you go and work with young kids who may not have very good role models, and you can encourage them to apply to college, and maybe they never even thought about applying to college. That may be one of our next dentists, our doctors, our nurses. And I've seen some upward bound kids come through. Yeah. So, but there's a ton of things you can do. And some of my students at UNT don't have cars. So there are things on campus. We have the wellness clinic on campus. Our Upward Bound is on campus. The Learning Center, you can tutor. One of our organic professors has their second year organic students tutor the first year. Of course, you have to be a good organic student. But those are awesome, and they found out that they didn't know they liked to teach. So I asked them, you want to teach in med school or dental school? And they said, well, yes, I think I might like to do that.
It opens up some doors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So many different ways to volunteer.
Absolutely. In fact, in our non-traditional applicants group, we have one of our members. She doesn't have much time to volunteer, but she loves knitting, and so she knits. She knits a lot, and what she does is she makes for patients who've had mastectomies.
Yes.
And so she's just hanging out.
Amazing.
That's what she does to decompress, but
Right.
in her time in decompressing, she's also helping other people.
Yeah.
Which is something that's really powerful, I think.
Yes. My mother was the recipient of some of the caps that people knitted.
Really?
Yes, when she was undergoing cancer treatment. So
Excellent.
It was just so awesome to see the patients in the treatment center, and they would go through the little cap, all colors. It was very cheerful.
Good.
It was a lovely thing.
Yeah. So find a volunteering opportunity.
Yeah.
If you need more volunteer opportunities,
Or through your church or synagogue or temple or, it's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
And people need help everywhere.
Yes, and those really speak to the core competencies of service orientation and the ethical responsibility to self and others.
And reliability.
Absolutely.
Because you want to show up if you've signed up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's everywhere.
Even though you're not getting paid, it's even more important because some of the nonprofits run on volunteer aid.
Well, speaking of not getting paid,
yes.
Let's talk about shadowing.
Yes, okay. And this can be difficult for students. Sometimes I suggest that people may want to wait to do shadowing until after they've completed organic chemistry, maybe, because they spend a lot of time on that, but not necessarily. Some people start in high school, shadowing in their clinical rotations that they do. Some people do in high school.
Yeah.
It depends on what you're trying to shadow for. I find that PAs, physician assistants, are sometimes difficult to find. Typically, though, you will be able to find those in an emergency department.
Okay.
But for medicine and dentistry, we have doctors who volunteer their time to help show people who they think want to be in their profession what it's really like, I say, in the trenches.
Yes.
Now that may sound a little negative, but you don't know what it is until you're there. You cannot watch a program on TV, even those documentaries. You can't smell the smells, for one thing.
Yeah.
You can't, see the kid throw up on the pediatrician's shoes. You can't know what it's like until you're there. And this is sort of an overlap, but the people who are scribing, they're with a doctor all the time. That's their job.
Yeah.
And they are in the trenches. Many times in an emergency department. The scribes have expanded into other places now, other kinds of practices. And the people who I've had a pre-dental who was observing surgery, oral surgery, and didn't realize he fainted at the sight of blood. So this is good to know.
Very good
if you
to know.
want to be an oral surgeon. And he fell and hit his head and had to be stitched up by the oral surgeon. So, I mean, he was laughing. It wasn't funny at the time, I'm sure. But that also shows that you have a good sense of humor if you can put that in your essay. And that's sometimes very important in such serious professions, is that you can diffuse situations sometimes with a little humor.
Really let your personality come through.
Right, and many times you don't see that in those professions. I think you see it more with dentists.
Probably.
Yeah, because you're looking for that very good personality in a dentist because you're in people's spaces more.
Yeah, and I mean, as far as shadowing opportunities go, there are doctors who have had to, in their training, go out and seek shadowing opportunities as well.
Yeah.
And so if you come across somebody who has to say no because of some sort of institutional policy, don't give up. Pick up the phone, find a phone book somewhere in some corner, and just start calling, because you'd be surprised how welcoming a lot of doctors are to aspiring doctors.
Sorry to interrupt you there. Yeah. We also have club meetings where we have speakers.
Yes.
And that's often a good place to find someone who will allow you to shadow, because if they're willing to come all the way to campus and shadow and talk to the group, then oftentimes they'll say yes, and sometimes they go through me. And I'm fine with screening. But another place, the shadowing of the veterinarians. Usually that they're working in the office anyway because they need a lot of vet hours. So that's one other place. Again, going back to the PAs who come and speak to clubs are usually willing to have people shadow.
And I'm glad you bring up clubs, because a lot of times clubs are able to facilitate that connection with someone in the community that can help provide shadowing hours as well. Exactly. Clinical experiences. All right. Well, let's go on to our fifth of the four-legged stool.
Okay.
The communication. This really applies to, those in Group B who actually did receive an interview and may not have been selected.
Right. So. And it's hard to tell without having witnessed what happened in the room, because sometimes you think, oh, that really went well. Or maybe it didn't go well, but maybe they were testing the person to see kind of what they're made of. So you really can't judge that all the time. But the good communication skills really do cover all aspects of what people are trying to do, and that also includes the grades. And can you talk to your professor? Do you go to office hours? And this will be important down the road when you're going to ask that professor for a letter of recommendation for the application. The testing somewhat, and that may go into your preparation. And some people have study groups. And so that's, again, good communication skills. The volunteering, by all means. And you can really hone your good communication skills. Now, communication also ties in with maybe if you're an outgoing person, an extrovert or an introvert. And there are different kinds of volunteering and doing things where you can help your communication skills. But your friend who did the knitting, maybe she's in the knitting circle, and you could do that. And I did have a person, he was a pre-dental and he's very outgoing, but I was asking, he was kind of low on his volunteering opportunities, and he said, oh, I knit. And so he started knitting initially for friends and family. And I said, oh, well, then maybe you could do it for the Battered Women's Center that we have in town, or maybe even riding out sometime with a policeman on something related, where maybe kids are involved, and saying, oh, would you like to have this little throw that I made, or something like that. And it's amazing how people can that helps situations sometimes. But again, back to the interview situation, and I was interviewing a person this week with my HPAC students, and she was painfully shy, and you kind of had to pull information out of her. But be willing to speak.
Yeah.
And sometimes even a speech class may help with that. And
Yes.
forcing yourself to get up in front of people, and they're your peers. And even volunteering as a tutor. Or start, if you're painfully shy, working with young kids, and they're very non-judgmental.
Right.
So you can read them a story and go out and talk to people, and start with your advisors.
Oh, they're all ready.
We're ready.
They're
We
ready.
want to listen. So, but the good communication skills are, you use it in every facet of your life.
And kind of on the other end of the spectrum, I've interviewed students to come into special programs, and I've had some where I ask one question and 45 minutes later they are still talking about
Yes.
something that is completely unrelated. 45 minutes of talking and they've never hit the question.
Exactly.
And so, you have your introverts who have to go out of their way to kind of
Yes.
meet people, but you also have extroverts who kind of need to reel themselves back a little bit,
Yeah.
and have that self-awareness.
Yeah. Yeah. I
that-
had one of those interviews this time also. Yes. And all I asked was, tell me a little about yourself. And there's that question too that can be a trap. But it should be about 2 minutes long. The elevator speech, the 2-minute commercial. And 30 minutes later, it was the end of our interview, and I hadn't had a chance to ask a question. So, yes.
Yeah, and I think I'm definitely guilty of that. And I think some of the things that have helped have been, business type of podcasts, getting your elevator pitch down,
Right.
Thinking a little bit more concisely and clearly about what you want to talk about.
Right.
And definitely mindfulness and making sure that you're in the moment and really connecting with what's going on in the present time.
Correct.
And you Google any of those and you will find
Oh, yeah.
wealth of resources
Yes.
that'll help you with that.
Yes, you
So
can.
we have both sides of the coin there.
We do. Yes. I just thought of a thing we did not cover in the communication skills, and that's the foreign language element.
Oh, let's please cover that.
Because communicating with someone in their own language, something's always lost in translation. I think there's a movie out that says lost in translation. It is true. Whether it's Spanish or Mandarin Chinese, one of my scribes was fluent in Mandarin, and there was a patient who came in and no one knew what he was speaking, and he was able to step in and at least find out what was wrong with the patient. But still, being able to speak with someone in your own native language, no matter where you are. And I know political issues are very tenuous right now, and people are scared. And but being able to speak the language is so important. So take the Spanish 4, or even take French. And Spanish and French are close. You could learn Spanish. So very important thing is to be able to speak the language.
And I've talked to several students who, they're native Spanish speakers or native Vietnamese speakers.
Yes.
And I always remind them that, it's great to be able to talk to family in that native language, but you also want to push yourselves to be able to speak in that language professionally as well.
Yes, and you never know. One of my Vietnamese students was translating for his dad to get on the Affordable Care Act. And the person at the other end said, "Oh, you can speak Vietnamese." And she hired him to help in the insurance.
That's awesome.
To sign up people. So you never know.
Exactly. And, people who speak in those languages need help. They need access to healthcare, and they need access to quality healthcare providers.
And I think also that goes back to practicing medicine, dentistry, any kind of medicine from the heart, and thinking about that patient.
Absolutely.
And how to help them in all ways.
All right. Well, now that we've covered our ever-growing stool,
the basics.
Yes, let's move on to kind of figuring out where we need to improve our application.
Okay.
And I think we wanted to discuss personal reflection and how important that is for our re-applicants.
Right. And it's better to be honest with yourself, I think, and realistic. And maybe that's writing things down and writing down the things that you're very strong in your strengths, and then of course the weaknesses are the things you need to improve on. And typically you'll have a pretty good idea. But again, those advisors, the health professions advisors, are glad to help you map out those things, and there are mapping devices as well. The AAMC, the AMCAS, has some good tools for mapping some things as well. I meant to mention that earlier. And that's aamc.org.
And we'll include links for that in the description.
And the TMDSAS.com has great tools now and excellent things that can help you recognize some things you may need to work on. And y'all have a new Facebook page, I think, for...
Yes, we have two groups, the TMDSAS Non-Traditional Applicants,
right,
and then the TMDSAS Hub, which is open to everybody. And those are really key for a lot of applicants who are kind of interested in kind of gauging what it's like to be a pre-med. It's especially helpful for non-traditionals who, they're working a full-time job, they have a family, and all of a sudden they decide, hey, I think I want to become a dentist now. And their entire lifestyle has to change. It's really comforting to know that you're not alone in making these decisions, and that there are other people out there who have to make similar sacrifices and kind of learning from their story.
Exactly. Yes.
And so, I think that personal reflection and really analyzing your strengths and your weaknesses in your applications,
right,
extremely important for a re-applicant,
especially for the re-applicant, because, and it may just be that your application was quite good, but then there are a lot of people applying who were just as good or maybe a little stronger applicant this time. So it's good to reflect on that and think, oh, do I need more shadowing experiences or more volunteering and service type things to show my altruism a little better? Or maybe you do need to improve on the DAT or the MCAT or the GRE. So there are many, and we discussed the grades as well, and oftentimes that can be a sticking point. And the course selection.
Yes.
And we kind of touched on it a little bit, but you want the challenging courses.
Right.
And all students know the courses that you can make an A in, even in biology and chemistry, those courses that they're an easy A maybe, or an easy B. And oftentimes also, I want to address this also, that people are a person is a B student, which isn't bad.
Right.
Except you're competing with people who are predominantly A students and with a few B's, because a B is just a 3.0.
Yeah.
And that typical profile is around a 3.7 now for both medical and dental. Yeah. And the vet is also.
It's real close.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, before I let you go, I do know that you have a resource that you'd like to share with everybody who may not have an advisor.
Yes. I'm a volunteer advisor for the National Association of Advisors for the Health Professions, and that website is naahp.org. And we provide a service to anybody who needs an advisor. And you would just be assigned an advisor, and generally Dr. Cannon is in charge of assigning those, and I get most mostly student or people. They're mostly post-bacs now who have been out of school for a long time or in another profession. And so their career changers are post-bac students. And I contact them by email initially. We oftentimes have a phone conversation. I had one of mine who contacted me from an airport. She said, "Oh, I'm on my way to an interview. What do I do?"
Oh my!
And I said, "Okay, well, you're the first thing. You've made the first leg here. They're interested enough that you got the interview."
Yeah.
So oftentimes you just kind of have to talk them down a little bit, and they're very good people. You know, they want to serve humanity, and that's what everything is about in this profession.
Absolutely.
All the professions is serving humanity from the heart. And I know that you can get discouraged. The students can, and get a little bit beaten down in med school or dental school, or because the work is so intense, and you think it's not going to end. But I just want people to remember to keep that heart in their practices.
Yes.
And the humanity in their practices. That's my main thing, because I want to go to a dentist who has my best interest at heart, as well as my doctor and my vet, of course, who's very important that I get my dog good treatments.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And just keep at it. We need you.
We need you desperately, and I want to have the best doctors. And another pet project, I guess, is the underserved areas.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to go back there.
Right.
And serve. My dad drives 80 miles to a heart doctor. He's 93 years old.
My goodness.
And he does it often. And we need people in rural areas. We need people in underserved city areas.
Dr. Beck, before we let you go, any parting thoughts?
No, I think that pretty much covers it.
All
but
right.
I'm always delighted to see the re-applicants. This also shows resilience.
Yes.
And the perseverance. And in my letters, I always try to bring out the personal competencies. And that goes for the vet letters, the dental letters, and the medical letters. Because those competencies, that shows your humanity.
Yes, absolutely.
So go after the competencies.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us today.
I was delighted to be here. Thank you.
All right. We will include several links that we've referred to in the description of this episode, including the email address for reaching out to the NAAHP. Again, if you are interested in finding an advisor, and again, this is not if you already have an advisor. This is for those students who do not have access to any advisors whatsoever. You can send an email to volunteer.advisor@naahp.org and provide a detailed question, your full name, and when you graduated, and they will put you in touch with a volunteer advisor. And we will include links to this and all of the other wonderful topics that we've discussed today. Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of the podcast. We hope that you found it helpful. On behalf of everybody here at TMDSAS, we're gearing up for the application cycle, and we wish you all the best of luck. We'll talk to you next time.